I love that sound.
Thank God you're here. We are Derek and Mike, the robe trotting guys, and in one of our recent videos, we talked to you about one of our favorite things about living in Denmark, and it's that we get to celebrate two sets of holidays, American holidays and Danish holidays. So we thought we would make this video about all of the cool Danish holidays that we didn't learn about until we moved to Denmark.
Now, this video isn't going to cover every single holiday in Denmark, but we hope it's a fun overview with some of our favorites. So make sure that you share in the comments if you have some special regional or family variations on these themes. So with that, let's get started.
Good Nytår.
Good Nytår.
So I know what you're thinking. New Year's Eve is actually the end of the year, but for the purpose of this video, we're going to start with New Year's Eve. And it's pretty cool in Denmark because everybody celebrates it pretty much the same way. It's really cool for the whole country to come together at 6 p.m. for the Queen's speech. That's where we hear all of her good wishings for the new year and her thanks for the year that we've just closed out. At that point, after her speech, everybody maybe has a few drinks and then sits down together for a nice meal together, sometimes even goes out to dinner depending on what you do with your friends or your family. After a long dinner, usually with some schnapps and some wine, everybody gathers around the television one more time for a little skit, old-timey sketch comedy, and that happens in the 11 o'clock hour. And it's called the 90th birthday party, and the punchline that you'll hear continuously throughout the skit is, same procedure as last year, Miss Sophie?
Same procedure as every year, Derek. Now, once the skit ends and we put Miss Sophie to bed, the Danes will get that joke right there. That's when the fun begins, because at that point, the clock is usually about 4 or 5 minutes to midnight, and everyone is there watching the TV with it focused on the clock tower of Copenhagen City Hall, watching the clock slowly go to midnight. It's a pretty cool scene. This isn't like New Year's Rocking Eve where somebody's counting down and there's all kinds of performances. It's just a camera on City Hall and all kinds of fireworks going off around it. And there's a couple little traditions that Danes have around it. The big one is that you always jump into the new year. So get up on a couch or on a chair and you jump into the new year. We've read some places that it says that people bang pots and pans, but in our experience, that isn't the case. But let us know in the comments if you bang pots and pans in your part of Denmark.
Yeah, the only thing we've ever noticed is fireworks and lots of fireworks because they're only legal to be sold in Denmark during that few days between Christmas and New Year. So people stock up and you pretty much hear fireworks all day. But it's a lot of fun and Happy New Year.
Skål.
And the next holiday that we'll talk about as we continue the calendar is Fastelavn. And that's basically a holiday that is kind of set up for children at the beginning of Lent, and it combines Halloween and Mardi Gras. So it's a bit like something that's familiar, at least for us as Americans, but it's pretty cool the way that we do it here in Denmark.
Yeah, and probably the most famous part of the Fastelavn celebration is katten of tønden. I totally butchered that, but it's knocking the cat out of the barrel. Think of a Danish pinata. This is where you have a wooden barrel you hang from a tree, you fill it with candy, and kids go up and hit the pinata or hit the barrel to knock the candy out. And the prizes are for the first person that's able to knock the candy out of the barrel. That's going to be the katten dronning, or the cat queen. And then the person who actually knocks all the barrel off the tree, they get to be the cat king, or the kattekong.
Yeah, so it's a pretty cool holiday, and our favorite part of Fastelavn, though, is the pastries, because think about it, Denmark, we wouldn't have a holiday if there weren't some kind of delicious baked goods. So all of the Fastelavn pastries are delicious. They're basically, think of rolls or puff pastries that are filled with custard and fruit preserves and just all kinds of delicious, sweet, wonderful pastries. So it's a great bonus, and it's a really cool way to celebrate the beginning of the Lent season.
Now, at the other end of Lent is, of course, Easter. Easter in Denmark isn't as dramatic as you may find in other European countries. There's no major passion plays or passion passages through the streets of Denmark at all. It's a little more of a private and a quieter affair than elsewhere in Europe.
And we find that with most religious things in Denmark, especially the religious holidays, where it's kind of observed more personally and not necessarily a big religious over-the-top spectacle. It's done more of a personal and secular way. And the highlight of the Easter holiday is getting together for a Påske or an Easter lunch. And that's done with friends and family. And it's usually some traditional foods as well as the traditional påskebrew or any kind of alcohol. So påskebrew is beer, but also it's a very schnapps-fueled event, and something that kind of reminds me a bit of how we in America celebrate Thanksgiving, where it's centered of getting all of your family together to mark the changing of seasons and kind of celebrate it with food and some alcohol and just good times with your family and friends. Okay, so the next holiday that's a little bit different for us to celebrate takes place on April 16th. So we're just cruising through the calendar, and that is the Queen's birthday. Now, obviously, we never celebrated this one before, but the way that's usually done in Denmark, at least in Copenhagen, is everybody goes to Amalienborg Palace, the home of the Queen, and sings her happy birthday. But we choose to honor her by not singing to her, and if you've ever been to karaoke with us, you'll know why.
But the Queen isn't the only royal who gets to have her birthday celebrated. All the royals are celebrated in Denmark in the traditional way, with Danish flags, of course. Whenever it's a royal's birthday, you'll see Danish flags flying on public buildings, and you'll see flags flying on all the buses going by through the city. We can never remember whose birthday is when, so whenever we see the flags in the bus, we certainly have to look up to see whose birthday it is today.
But if you want to learn more about the royals, you can check out the playlist that we have just above us right now to learn more about this awesome Danish royal family.
Next in the calendar is probably our favorite holiday of the entire year, Great Prayer Day, or Store Bededag. Now, based on its name, you might think that this is the day when Danes all gather together to pray and give thanks. It's not, but what it is probably one of the best examples of Danish practicality and efficiency. Now, Great Prayer Day itself dates back to 1686, when King Christian V decided that he wanted to complete the Reformation in Denmark and consolidate all these little saints' days that occurred in the spring into one single day. Why have all these holidays when you can do all of it on one single day?
Yeah, and we haven't seen too many traditional ways that it's celebrated, although we have heard that people usually go for a walk around the old ramparts at Kastellet in Copenhagen. So maybe we'll do that one year. We also heard that people eat bread because the bakeries were closed and people would have to make sure that they were well fed and had enough bread in the house for the long weekend of Great Prayer Day.
For us, Great Prayer Day typically ends up just being a fun day with friends having some beers on the harbor. But probably more importantly, Great Prayer Day begins the big spring holiday season. It's the first of 3 long weekends that we get to celebrate Great Prayer Day, Ascension, which actually happens on a Thursday, but everyone takes the long weekend, and finally Whit Monday.
Now, moving through the calendar, the next big holiday would be May 1st, or International Workers' Day. And in Denmark, it's a big deal because trade unions get off and they fought hard to have the kind of work environment and workers' rights that all Danes enjoy. Now, not everybody is off on this day. In fact, we've never been off because if you work in an office or have kind of a white-collar job, you're not guaranteed to be off for Labor Day. But often they'll give you Constitution Day off as a little bonus gift if you don't have May 1st off for Labor Day.
Next on the calendar comes May 5th, which is Liberation Day. This marks the end of the German occupation of Denmark during World War II in 1945. But the celebration actually starts the night before, and the reason for this is because at 8:35 p.m. on May 4th, the BBC announced that the Germans had surrendered, effective the next day. But the Danes couldn't wait. My God, they'd been occupied for 5 years, and so everybody ripped down the heavy shades they had in their windows and lit some candles in the window. This tradition continues to this day, where on the evening of May 4th, you'll find Danes putting candles in the windows all over the country.
And a month later, on June 5th, we celebrate Constitution Day in Denmark. Now, it's funny because Denmark is one of the few countries in the world that doesn't actually have a national day. On June 5th, it celebrates basically the signing of the Constitution in the year 1849, and then a little over 100 years later in 1953, when a new version of the Constitution was adopted. And it's kind of just a day to celebrate democracy because, in Denmark, it became a constitutional monarchy, not by overthrowing the king or queen and not through some kind of bloody revolt or civil war. It just was a slow transition from about the year 1200 to the modern state of Denmark today. And in that regards, it's basically a low-key holiday where basically they just celebrate democracy. And it's pretty cool.
Yeah, you're not going to find epic military parades like you see on Bastille Day or Victory Day in Russia. It's low-key. There might be some speeches, might be a few politicians out there doing things, but for the rest of us, it's just a day off. And one little comment on that, because one thing we've also learned that's different from the US is that in the US, if a holiday happens to fall on a weekend, like July 4th is on a Saturday, you get off the Friday or the Monday after. But in Denmark, if it falls on a weekend, it just doesn't happen at all. So for example, 2021 is what they call a bad year because we have Constitution Day, Christmas Day, and New Year's Day all happening on the weekend. So that's 3 fewer vacation days that we have to take.
Good thing we always get 5 weeks vacation though.
Later in June, on June 23rd, comes Sankt Day. This is basically Denmark's version of Midsummer, and it's a tradition that's in most of the Scandinavian countries, celebrating John the Baptist, as his Danish name is Sankt Hans. The main way that Sankt Hans Day is celebrated is with huge bonfires along lake shores and beaches all over Denmark. And this symbolizes the burning of witches, as witches are supposed to go back to a witches' meeting on the mountain Brocken in Germany. Don't entirely understand why there's witches or what the whole meaning is on it, but that's what we do.
Yeah, and I remember the first year that we moved here, people said, oh, let's go to the bonfire. Oh, what's the bonfire for? Oh, it's where they burn the witches. And it sounded like really confusing that people were going to go out and burn an effigy of a witch, but it was a lot of fun, and it was a great excuse to kind of have like just this big community party around a bunch of bonfires, especially in the middle of summer where you have those really late sunsets, and it was a great way to just kind of hang out and enjoy a perfect time of year. Nearly year again, nearly year again. Okay, so that song actually, the Danes will know, everybody else may be confused, but it actually means now it's Christmas again. And I know you're probably thinking, how did we go from June to December just like that? But it's basically the way things go in Denmark. There's no actual legal holidays between June and the Christmas season. But there's a ton of things that go on in between that. So first of all Danes are guaranteed 3 weeks of holiday in the summer months. And there's also all kinds of festivals and celebrations and things that go on around the country in between that time. So for those who stay behind, there's music festivals and cultural festivals and all kinds of things in the summer and fall months. There's also the back to school traditions, and a lot goes on, but none of them are actual legal holidays. So we'll kind of skip over them and maybe hit on some of them in future videos. Now, we could do an entire video on the Christmas traditions in Denmark, which are really cool, and we probably will do that, so make sure you subscribe so you can find out when we put those videos out way later on in the year.
Yeah, and one of the main reasons why we love Christmas in Denmark so much is that Christmas lasts so much longer here than in the US. In the US, Christmas doesn't really start until you get done with Thanksgiving at the end of November. But here, Christmas starts in early November, and that means in early November you get Christmas decorations, lights over the streets, Christmas markets open, Christmas parties, and most especially the famous julefrokost. And Christmas is so much fun here as well because the traditions are similar to what we're used to in the US, but a little bit different. Here, Santa Claus becomes Juleman, and his elves are known as Nissa. And these guys, they don't live on the North Pole, they live in Greenland, in fact.
Yeah, and the big celebration in Danish Yule or Danish Christmas season actually occurs on December 24th. So it's another way that Christmas is a little bit different than we're used to in the United States. But on the 24th, what we would call Christmas Eve back home, the Danish families get together and have the traditional Danish Christmas meal, which is actually pretty nice. And we've had it quite a few times ourselves. In fact, pretty much every year. In addition to the big family dinner, there's a Disney special that comes on before dinner, and everybody opens their presents and dances around the Christmas tree, which has actual lit candles on it, and quite a few other traditions that we won't get into for this video, but if you come back, especially around Christmas, we will have some awesome content about that later on in the year. Okay, now you're probably expecting us to end with some grog or julebrew, but we're out of that. Instead, we're going to have this Svinke brown ale, which is from the island of Bornholm.
Yeah, we chose Svaneke from Bornholm because there's an interesting fact around Bornholm related to Liberation Day. While most of Denmark was liberated on May 5th, Bornholm had to hold out for one more year because they were actually occupied by the Soviets, and they weren't liberated from the Soviets until 1946.
So on that happy note, skål!
Skål!